My name is Alex Riley. I deal with things people don't like to discuss over dinner. I'm not a cop. I'm worse. I'm the one they call when the cops fail. That evening, I wasn't planning anything more than cheap bourbon and toothless noir on an old television, but the phone had other plans. Riley? A woman's voice. Refined, like it was tailored. You're expected at the Smith estate. Urgently. Who's calling? Edgar Smith himself. He said you're the only one he trusts. He doesn't know me. Exactly. Smith, billionaire, tech genius, philanthropist, or, as they whisper behind closed doors, a shark in a silk tie. He's not liked, he's feared. He's featured on magazine covers, then wiped from fingerprints. I arrived in a black cab because anything else doesn't survive in this neighborhood. The mansion looked like a museum of ego. Glass, concrete, and far too much lighting. At the entrance, a guard the size of a fridge and a face that had seen worse than my dreams. You're expected in the small hall. The big one's taken? He didn't laugh. Fair enough. Smith stood by the window, as if he was controlling the weather. The suit couture, the watch worth an apartment. In his eyes, the boredom of a predator before the hunt. Riley, a pleasure to meet you. Not sure the feeling's mutual yet. He smirked. I don't need friendship. I need common sense. Tonight I'm hosting a reception. The person blackmailing me will be among the guests. I want you there, watching. Don't interfere. Just observe. Sounds legal. Legal is boring. I raised an eyebrow. What am I looking for? He turned to me. Slowly. Someone who knows how I think too well. Who can kill without getting their hands dirty? And who will do it tonight? Is there anyone who doesn't want you dead? He smiled. That's the challenge, Mr. Riley. I've gathered everyone who hates me. Time to find out who's ready to cross the line. I looked at him and realized, if this evening ends without a body, it'll be a miracle. And if there is a body, the only question is whose. And the worst part, it could be his. I ended up in the billionaire's house by mistake. Or more precisely, by invitation. Which is basically the same thing when someone calls you at 7 in the morning, says your name and asks you to drop by, there's something to discuss. On the other end, a voice thick as cognac. Mr. Riley, you'll find this interesting, it's unofficial, but vitally important, preferably today. So I came, because I don't like loose ends. Especially not the kind that come from rich people with too many secrets and not enough time. The mansion in Bay Ridge, as expected, looked like a crime scene before anything even happened. Snow-white columns, security, grass, trimmed like military parade, and expensive people in expensive suits discussing cheap concerns. I was greeted by a butler. Yes, you heard me right, a butler. With a face like he spent a lifetime swallowing comments that etiquette doesn't allow. You're expected in the ballroom, he said. I smirked. I hope there's no waltz. The ballroom turned out to be anything but. It was an arena. And in the center, as if lit by a spotlight, stood Edgar Smith. Billionaire, tech magnate, a man with no competition. Because anyone who could have become a rival he bought or buried. In the business sense, at least he used to. He was alive, technically, but on his face the shadow of a man who had already said goodbye to this life. Only no one bothered to see him off. Alex Riley, he said, without getting up from his chair, I've wanted to speak to you for a long time. That's usually how letters begin when they arrive posthumously, I said. I hope you're not writing your memoirs? I'm not that sentimental, he waved a hand. I have a problem. I assume you have a lot of those. Should we sort them alphabetically? He smiled. Tonight, someone's going to try to kill me. I looked at him for a few seconds. Then I turned and walked toward the door. All right, got it. Rich man, paranoia, weak security, need to flex. I've seen it before. I'm not joking. His voice turned sharp. This isn't a guess. It's a script. Fully written, with actors, a location, and motive. I stopped. A script? Who's the writer? He looked at me like it was the first time all day he truly saw me. My ex-wife? Now, that got my attention. Bold choice, I said. Actress, director, producer, all of the above. Her name is Veronica Blake. Used to act in theater, then in our marriage. Now she's free. She said, "Tonight you die, and no one will be surprised." Max would have said, "That's a clear motive." But Max wasn't here yet. I like coming alone. It made spotting lies easier. "And what do you want from me?" I asked. "Stay here, watch, remember, and if needed, figure out who crossed the line." I didn't answer right away because something in his voice didn't sound like a request. It sounded like a confession. "So you already know who it is?" I asked. "You just don't want to admit it." He looked away. "I just want to see who steps out of the shadows." By evening, the guests started arriving. Everything was staged like a classy reception waiters with trays, live jazz, cocktails with names that sounded like medical conditions. But I knew this wasn't a party. It was a hunt. The only question was, who was hunting whom? Veronica Blake arrived exactly at 9. Dress red, lips crimson, gaze sharp like a billionaire cigar. She saw Smith but didn't approach. She just watched, as if to say, "I already did what I came to do." 10 minutes later, someone turned off the lights. When they came back on, Edgar Smith was dead. And my job began. Where the smiles end, truth begins. I always knew, in a billionaire's house, smiles aren't emotions. They're part of the dress code, especially at parties. Especially when you're greeted by a man in a tuxedo with a headset in one ear and a drop of sweat in the other from tension. From the beginning, everything was too perfect to be real. The chandeliers straight out of Vienna, the waiters like they were flown in from Paris, the guests pulled from glossy magazines, and the body like out of a novel, only this one wasn't fiction. Smith was lying on the floor of his library, face contorted, eyes fixed on the ceiling. He died fast, too fast, like a man who had long accepted the idea of dying, but not tonight, and not by that hand. And yes, I knew this was murder, because people die quietly, and his quiet felt too carefully staged. Max and I had arrived earlier than usual. I was on the guest list under the name Mr. Blair, an independent journalist. Max wore a badge that read assistant, short word, in his case kind of insulting. But he said nothing. He was learning. As always, Smith had leaned in and whispered in my ear when we hugged at the entrance, "Alex, they all think they know why they came. But the truth is, they're all here for one reason, to see who falls first." I didn't think that first would be him. "Blunt force trauma," said the medical examiner, already peeling off his gloves. "Instant death. No pain. No struggle. Very professional." "Or just very confident," I said. Max stood by the window, scanning the garden. "Were there cameras out there?" he asked. Smith had everything. Cameras, guards, total control. "But there's one problem, Max. The cameras went dark 5 minutes before his death." He turned to me. "A malfunction or sabotage? The question is from outside or from within." Max bit his lip, a sign he remembered something. I gave him time. I went back to the lounge. People were drinking wine. Some were quietly crying. Some were quietly glad it wasn't them lying on the library floor. Murder turns everyone into either a witness or a suspect. In this room, we had both. I picked up a glass, not with wine, with plain water, placed it on the table, just like Smith used to. He always drank water, said it kept his mind sharp, which means whoever killed him knew the cameras would be off, knew he'd be alone, knew he'd be drinking, knew he'd be waiting, and knew he wouldn't be waiting long. Alex Max said, appearing behind me, "There's something strange in the security logs. One of the guests checked in twice. Name? Nathan Reese. First entry at 6:02 p.m., second at 6:19 p.m., and in between, nothing. As if he left and came back in again. Only the cameras at the entrance never saw him leave. A ghost? Or someone using his name?" I smirked. The show was starting. Chapter 4. The letter that wasn't there. Sometimes the truth isn't in what you're told. It's in what they don't want you to see. Take the letter, for instance. Lord Edgar Smith was murdered. That's a fact. But an hour before his death, there was a letter on his writing desk. Elegant envelope with a crest. Now the letter's gone. Some would call that a trifle. But I'd say, no one kills a billionaire mid-reception, champagne in hand, for nothing. People like that, trust dies first. Then they follow. Meanwhile, Max was sitting in his corner, digging through archives and casually munching on chips like it was just another Tuesday. "Did you know," he said, "that our dear Lord Smith had been corresponding with a lawyer who later turned up drowned in the Tiber?" "What?" I turned. "Yeah. Rumor is Smith was planning to change his will in favor of a certain Miss Claire Devlin. That one red dress, cold eyes." I said nothing. Claire wasn't just a beautiful guest. She was the reason the curtain started trembling before the lights went out. "Where is she now?" I asked. "Giving an interview to a vlogger, looking straight into the camera like she's performing her own life. Nerves of steel, or a mask of steel." Max and I headed her way. She greeted us with a faint half smile. Too faint. "Gentlemen, I thought I'd already been questioned." "We're not here to interrogate," I said. "We're here to understand. And if you're lying, we'll know before you can say I had nothing to do with it." She sighed and adjusted an emerald bracelet. "Most likely a gift from the deceased." "What do you want?" "A letter," I said. "It's missing. Did you know about it?" Number, I'm not the type people trust with letters. They trust me with companies. I leaned in. "But you were the last person he smiled at before the shot." She flinched, just slightly, but I saw it. "Do you really think I could have done it?" "No," I said. "I think you knew he would die." That's easier. To be a witness, and then a widow, without the marriage. This time, she smiled, without the elegance. "So what now?" "Now I'm not looking for the gun. I'm looking for fear. Whoever feared him pulled the trigger." At that moment, Max handed me the tablet. On the screen, a photo, the letter, captured by a security cam. Next to it, a hand, male, wearing a ring with a raven's head. "The ring?" Claire asked. Her voice cracked for the first time. "Hugo has one like that. Smith's brother." I looked at her. "Now, Miss Devlin, you're finally telling the truth." I stood at the whiskey bar, thinking about how fake people can be when money is in the room. Billionaire Edgar Smith had thrown a party. Not just any party, an anniversary, supposedly. Or charity, or maybe just another reputation rinse. In any case, everyone in that room wasn't invited for who they were, but for what they were hiding. Max, my partner, lingered by the entrance distracted by the waitress. I'd trained myself not to call him out for it. Sooner or later, he'd spot something I missed. So for now, I sipped my scotch while the comedy for the rich played out around me. Riley, a voice called out. Female, raspy, confident. It was Ruby Wells, an actress once, now Edgar's ex-wife. And if the rumors were true, she very much wanted to become his current again. She approached close, uninvited. Still sniffing out other people's sins, Alex? Only if they smell like murder, I replied. She smirked. There was no flirtation in her eyes, just an icy glint. Then stay. Tonight comes with a twist. And she walked away. I barely had time for a sip before the sound came. Not a gunshot. Not yet. A plate. Dropped. Someone turned too fast. Or tensed up too hard. I already knew. Tension has a scent, like rain before a storm. It always comes first. And then, like it was scripted, a shot. One. Muted. Heavy. From the study. The crowd froze. Someone screamed. Someone ran. Someone stood still. I moved. Max was already running beside me. His instincts were still fresh, like a rookie cop's, but his steps were sharp. We entered Edgar Smith's study 17 seconds after the shot. He was seated in his chair, head tilted back, eyes like mirrors, empty. A clean hole in his forehead. No struggle, no screams. Everything was too quiet. I closed my eyes for a moment, just long enough to imagine who could have stood over that chair with a gun and ice in their veins. Max's eyes were already darting around the room. Did anyone enter or leave? He asked the security guard who'd rushed in behind us. No one. Everyone's still in the ballroom. The cameras confirm it. I sighed. Then the killer is still here. Still at the party. Smiling. Drinking. Telling jokes. And thinking we won't figure it out. Max looked at me. So what do we do? I finished my scotch. We continue the party. If you enter a billionaire's house, make sure you don't leave as the corpse, your own. I wasn't the kind to believe in coincidences, especially not when one man dies the exact moment everyone else is looking the other way. Smith sat in his chair, as dead as his sense of moderation. And in the ballroom stood people whose eyes all screamed the same thing. Please, not me. Max fidgeted beside me like a kid taking his first exam. Notebook in hand, panic in his head, and just one question in his eyes. We're not alone on this, right? I said nothing, because when someone drops dead at a party, and everyone knows your name, you're no longer a guest. You're the prime suspect. Let's start, I said. Who was the last to speak with Smith? Probably his wife, squeaked a voice from the corner. Martha Smith, a shark in diamonds, calm as ice, cold as a headstone. He was acting strange, she said, whispering something at the table, laughing, and then suddenly silence. I thought he dozed off. Did your husband often doze off in the middle of parties? Only when I hosted them. Brilliant. Morning with wit. I live for that level of cynicism. Who else was near him? His business partner, Brian Kelly. Saturday on his right. And that, what's his name? The actor? Lester? Number Lester was at the bar. I mean, Jason. Jason Rhea. Young, cocky, with the kind of face that's asking to be slapped. I nodded to Max. He was taking notes. And what was Jason doing? What actors usually do: talking too loud, laughing too fake, and possibly playing the wrong role. I stepped closer to the body. Smith looked peaceful, too peaceful. Like he hadn't died, just signed a contract for eternity. In the glass, unfinished whiskey. In his eyes, nothing. And on his lips, a smile? Do you feel that? Max whispered. Yeah. This place doesn't smell like death. It smells like a performance. You think he was murdered? I think someone wanted it to look like murder. Or worse, not look like it. I leaned over the body. In his hand, Max said, is that a business card? Yeah, half a one. Torn. Just the initials. J.R. Jason Rhea? Or someone who wants us to think that. I stood up. Where is Jason? Gone, Martha said. Disappeared the moment the chaos started. Said he was going to the restroom. Never came back. And that's when it hit me. Smith didn't just die. He gave a performance. And someone had already cut the next scene out of the script. Let me put it this way. If you find yourself in a billionaire's mansion on a Saturday night and you're still breathing, you're already lucky. If you're not a suspect yet, that's bingo. But I don't get nights like that. I stood in the corner of the lounge, pretending to listen to the cellist's performance. In reality, I was watching for the person whose eyes move faster than a greyhound at the races. People love to kill, especially those who already have everything else. To my left, Mrs. Grayson, a fading actress whose face hasn't matched her passport in years. To my right, Howard Nash, investor with a reptilian smile and the grip of a banker who survived 3 economic crashes. And in front of me, a stage, both literally and figuratively. On the floor, blood. On the billionaire's wife's face, surprise. And in the chef's hands, a knife. And silence, so deep you could hear the wine aging in the glasses. Nobody moves, I said loudly, clearly, like I'd rehearsed it. Because I really don't like it when evidence walks out in heels. Max appeared 2 minutes later. Asked me a question with his eyes. I answered the same way. Stay by the door, watch the faces, the show's about to start. And the first to speak was the one who really shouldn't have. I didn't do anything, the chef said, voice shaking. I just heard the scream, ran in, and he was already dead, I clarified. How convenient. Lying on the floor was Edgar Smith, host of the evening, Billionaire, alive at appetizers, dead by dessert. On his face, no pain, no fear, surprise, as if someone had shown him his tax returns in person. I knelt down. The wound was precise. 1 strike, no blood on the walls, no panic, not a crime. A signature. Max crouched beside me. 1 clean hit to the heart. Precise. Professional, I added. This wasn't a these things happen. This was I knew where to strike. The chef trembled, but I wasn't watching him. I was watching Mrs. Smith, wearing a champagne-colored dress with a face that showed neither fear nor hysteria, just mild irritation. Like the waiter had served the oysters warm. Anything you like to say, Mrs. Smith? Just one thing, she replied. I told him these parties were a bad idea. The crowd, surprisingly, didn't rush for the exit. Everyone stayed. Their eyes lit up, because when the richest man in the room dies, everyone suddenly remembers he had insurance. And, more importantly, a will. Max leaned in and whispered, cameras? Do we have any? Only exterior. Inside, he didn't like them. Said, I'm already under enough surveillance. Ironic, I nodded, then stood up, raised my hands like I was stepping onto a stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please don't leave. Tonight's new entertainment, a live investigation, murder mystery, no tickets needed. We go all night. Somewhere behind me, someone exhaled. Someone else started drinking nervously. Another slipped away to the bathroom. And I began watching, listening, reading. Because in houses like this, murder isn't a flash. It's the climax. And before the climax, there's always exposition. I just had to find it. And no one dies gracefully. Not even in a billionaire's penthouse, with crystal clinks and whispered brand names all around. I sat at the edge of his death, like sitting at the edge of a stage, watching a play that ended before the audience even understood the plot. Edgar Smith was dead, the richest man on the East Coast, collector of expensive watches and cheap friends, and yes, the man I was coincidentally supposed to have dinner with tonight. The same man who'd invited me himself. Now he was face down in a tuna tartare. And of course no one saw anything, except for the cameras, which, conveniently, weren't working. Max stood beside me, barely breathing. His eyes darted between the body, the table, the people, like he was trying to solve the crime by mapping the geometry of their stairs. I get it, but this wasn't the kind of case you solve with angles. This one was all about intention. I stood up. The room was too quiet, as if death itself had taken over as host. All attention on her. Don't touch anything, I said to the first one bold enough to approach. Not the plates, not the napkins, not even the damn flowers. The guests froze. Some took a step back, others a step closer. Classic. Anyone who gets close to the body is either guilty or dying to know who is. Who was the last to speak with him? I asked, not looking at Max. I didn't need the answer from him. I wanted everyone else to hear it. Came a voice. Male, smooth like sin, polished to a shine. We were discussing the auction. He was planning to put up a rare Patek Philippe. I tried to talk him out of it. I turned. Blazer worth twice my shoes. Cuffs you could see your future in. Name? Lawrence Duval. Art dealer. I nodded. Typical. Arrogant. Sure that speaking with confidence meant he wasn't a suspect. I had a bad feeling about him. I crouched beside the body. There was a trace of a smile on Edgar's lips. Not joy poison. Fast, elegant, no second chances. Where was the drink? I asked. He drank champagne. Only that, said a woman holding a glass. Blonde, voice like a cigarette tray. Specially brought from France. He didn't trust the local bubbles. Who served it? His personal sommelier. He left before it happened. Left? I raised an eyebrow. Max pulled out his phone instantly. Already checking. I stood up. No one leaves. Not until the police arrive. Someone gasped. Someone turned red. Someone tried to hide their irritation, which meant they were hiding something else too. But it wasn't about the reactions. It was about the connections. Smith didn't just die. He was invited to die, and they made sure he did it in style. And I was here. Not by accident. You know what the perfect evening at a Billionaire's looks like? The tables gleamed like a magazine spread. The champagne tasted like a morning without consequences. And the faces straight from a catalog of successful living. There were no random people here. Even random thoughts looked like a Netflix script. Max and I already knew the stakes had gone up. One man dead, another vanished, a third so silent you'd think he was being paid for it. And I stood in the corner of the ballroom, feeling like I'd seen it all before. Not in Life in a Book. Only in this book, someone had torn out a few pages. "You don't happen to have a gun, do you?" Max whispered, appearing at my side. Number, just intelligence, and a growing sense that we're about to slam into a concrete wall. Something new? Yeah. No one's lying anymore, which means everyone's telling the wrong kind of truth. We moved through the hall. The guests stood in little clusters, glasses, polite laughter, rehearsed glances. But I wasn't looking for smiles. I was looking for fakes. And there she was, Louisa Draper. Hollywood smile, voice like a charity auction host. But her fingers were trembling. And tremble, you can't fake that. Miss Draper. Were you acquainted with Mr. Edgar Smith? Acquainted? He personally invited me to the event. Wonderful, man. Generous. Saw the best in people. Lovely. I cut her off. Then maybe you can explain why you were the first to leave the room after his death and never came back? She froze. The smile drooped slightly, like poorly applied lipstick. I was in shock. I just couldn't take it. I stepped out to... She searched for the word, found it, get some water. You drank water for 58 minutes? I made a call. To whom? That's private. Not after a murder. It isn't. She fell silent, and I already knew she wasn't the killer. But she had a motive. And it didn't smell like blood. It smelled like jealousy. Max whispered, "Found a camera, the one facing the staircase. And it shows who went up, who came down, and exactly when the lights went out. Who? 3 people. Louisa, one of them. Second, the gardener, who turns out wasn't in the garden. And the third," I exhaled, because the third was a surprise. Julian Brown, quietest guest at the party, investor, speaks little, drinks moderately, laughs on cue. I looked at Julian. He sat in a chair by the fireplace, like someone who'd already picked his alibi. Only the fire behind him had started to melt the ice. I walked over. He looked up. "Detective Riley, have you found the killer?" "Not quite. Just those who tried not to be one." "That's an interesting way to put it. And you didn't try to kill?" He smirked, slowly, too confidently. "I'm too rational for impulse, and too smart for stupidity." "What if it wasn't impulse? What if it was a plan?" He leaned in closer. "Then you're probably not talking to the killer. You're talking to the one who hired him." Max froze in place. I smirked. "And you're saying this, why exactly?" "Because I know I have neither motive nor opportunity. But if someone's decided I'm the most logical suspect, then it's the perfect time to break your logic." "You think logic brought us here?" He shrugged. "Or intuition?" I nodded. "Intuition," I said. "And one more thing. Only a killer always believes he's the smartest one in the room, even when he didn't do it." I stood up. "We're leaving, Mr. Brown, but we'll be back. And when we return, we'll know who ordered it, who pulled the trigger, and who covered it up. In the meantime," I turned to Max, "find out what happened to that waiter, the one serving champagne a minute before Edgar died. No one's seen him since." Max was already dialing, and I looked out over the ballroom. People continued the evening, as if nothing had happened. And that is always the worst sign. Sometimes answers don't come with evidence. Sometimes they come with a cup of coffee, bitter, overbrewed, with a grain of sugar clinging to the edge. You sit there, staring through the steam, and in your head, not silence. A full-blown symphony. Suspicions, theories, faces, voices, and they're all shouting. Everyone wants to be right. I sat in Smith's office. Yes, his office. The billionaire whose party became a crime scene, now dead. Irony? More like an invitation to think. Everything here screamed power, leather, steel, sharp lines, as if the room itself was ready to arrest you. Max stood by the window, not breathing, young but already understood. When I go quiet, it's best not to interrupt. There was a folder on the desk. Thin. But with folders like that, the worst things come in slim packages. This is what you asked for, he said. Financial reports, funds, trusts, everything tied to tonight's event. I nodded. The folder wasn't the goal. It was the detonator. Now tell me, Max, I said, still not looking at him. If you had an enemy and you wanted to give him a gift, what would it be? He blinked. A knife? Clothes? An opportunity? A chance to make you look like a fool? Or kill you and make it look like an accident? Better yet, make you kill yourself without even knowing it. He sat down. You think Smith was set up? I think Smith had been a dead man for a while. He just hadn't stopped walking yet. A party's like a theater. The guests, actors, some played the victim, some the guilty, some just stood there as background noise, meant to distract. And I remember the one who stood too still. The bodyguard. Security for a billionaire isn't just some guy with an earpiece. It's someone who's seen everything from Mosul to the Maldives. And this one stood there like a statue, face blank like a bank account post-divorce. And when Smith's body was found, he didn't flinch. He already knew. Max, get me a file on security. Everyone working that night, especially anyone new. He went digging, and I opened the folder. Numbers, signatures. One trust had jumped $2 million just a day before Smith's death. Transferred offshore, name hidden. But the signature, the same as on the divorce agreement. His ex-wife, God, how I underestimated her. Cold, smart, too polite. And that night she left the party just in time. Max came back. One of the guards used a fake name. Hired a week ago, disappeared after the murder. I exhaled. The puzzle clicked. All that was left was the final piece. We're going to her place, I said. Don't we need a warrant? Right now, we've got a warrant for a conversation. After that, we'll see who cracks first. On the way, I thought, murder isn't a moment. It's a process. It starts with a glance, a thought, a silence that says too much, and then a shot, poison, a knife, or just the right pressure on the right button. And me, I listen. I don't see what people say. I see what they're afraid to say. And she's afraid, which means she knows. Have you ever seen someone die with a smile? Not theatrically, not like in the movies, but for real, as if death isn't an end, but a way to leave the party while the music is still playing. I've seen it right in front of me. It happened at Edgar Smith's reception. A billionaire, a philanthropist, and, as it turned out later, a decent actor. especially in the corpse genre. His body wasn't even cold yet, and waiters were already serving champagne in the next room, as if nothing had happened. Edgar lay by the marble staircase, as if he simply slipped off the pedestal of his own luxury. But I knew he didn't fall. He was pushed. "Riley," someone said beside me. I turned. Max, young like a sports drink commercial, and still not used to the smell of death. "Someone called an ambulance," he added, "and the police. But while they're on the way, we look for the truth." I cut in. Max nodded. He'd already learned. If you hear accident in a billionaire's mansion, look for premeditated. I crouched next to the body, neck bent unnaturally, eyes open, mouth half closed, like he was about to crack a joke, and thought better of it. "Cause of death?" Max asked. "Can't say at a glance," I muttered. "But definitely not the heart. Too clean, no panic, which means someone let him go out with dignity. Or made it look that way." I scanned the room. Everything was here. Crystal chandeliers, $5,000 coats, and faces that knew exactly what expensive lies smell like. And then her, Sophie Reed, actress. The kind of beauty that breaks paparazzi lenses, and Edgar's ex-wife, well, ex, in theory. She still showed up at all his parties, like a ghost with unfinished business. "Did you see what happened?" I asked, stepping up to her. "I only heard the scream," she said calmly. "And when I turned, he was already on the ground." "Strange," I said. "Usually when people hear a scream, they turn toward the sound, not wait for it to settle." "I'm not the skittish type, Mr. Riley," she smiled. "And I don't talk much either." "We'll see." I left her. She was playing a role, but not the one the director gave her. More like the one life cast her in. Max was already digging through the guest list. "Found something," he said. "One of the guests on paper isn't really a guest. The pass was issued to an old ID number, but the person died a year ago." "Name?" "Henry Jenkins. Investor. And a suspect in a case against Edgar that almost went to court last year. So someone came to the party using a dead man's name?" Max nodded. I looked down at the marble floor. The shadow from the chandelier shifted. Something wasn't right here. And that something was starting to smell less like money and more like blood under the money. At a party like this, if someone's smiling too wide, it's either me or the killer. Soft cello notes melted into the champagne glasses. At Smith's parties, the music was always live, so the guests never forgot that they were being watched by more than just cameras. Around us stood men in suits fit for presidential funerals, and women who looked like they had a separate price tag for appearing in someone's life. But I wasn't watching that. I was watching the one who held his glass too long without sipping. The one who never met anyone's gaze, but always stood at the center of the circle. The one who shouldn't have been here. Max stood by the wall, pretending to check his phone. In reality, tracking Arnold Blackwell, a business consultant, with more cross-border ops in his past than most Border Patrol units. He greeted the host too politely, and the victim too falsely. Yeah, Edgar Smith was still alive. When we walked in, "He knows we're watching," Max said, eyes still on his screen. "Of course he knows. Guys like him start their day with paranoia and end it signing contracts built on lies." I moved slowly across the hall. "No rush. Let them think I was just another guest." Or worse, a bored detective dragged here on someone else's dime. Somewhere near the bar, Jared was laughing. His voice sounded like he was born with a mic in his throat. But when someone laughs while knowing how another man will die, the sound is always just a little too loud. I walked closer to Smith. He stood by the fireplace, alone. And that was already strange. "Mr. Smith," I said. "Quiet night, it seems." He turned. His eyes were calm, but his fingers fidgeted with his cufflink. "Riley, I was waiting for you. You're like death, never late, but never on schedule either. And you're like life, loud, wealthy, and full of bad jokes." He smirked, but the eyes stayed cold. "Something bothering you?" "I don't like it when everyone at the party is smiling, except the one guy who keeps checking his watch every 15 seconds. You expecting someone?" "I'm always expecting someone. Keeps me from falling for the illusion that everything's fine." And then it happened. The thing we were probably all brought here for. The lights flicked. Once, twice. And in that moment, a scream. I rushed forward. Smith turned pale, but didn't move. By the stairs stood a young woman from the staff. She was shaking. She pointed upstairs. In the study, I was already running on instinct. Max right behind me. The staircase felt endless. The door slightly ajar. We stepped inside. On the floor lay a man, Edgar Smith, the second one, dead. Nearby, an overturned vase, blood on marble, no signs of struggle. Max froze in the doorway. "Who was that?" I stepped closer, the body fresh, warmer than the lies being served downstairs. No pulse. On the neck, a mark. Something flat, thin. A ribbon or wire. I turned to Max. The man who spoke to us downstairs wasn't Smith. What? A double. Or a brother. Or the oldest trick in the book. He knew someone was after him, and he used someone else, or used himself. Max turned pale. Then who died? Someone who wasn't supposed to live, or maybe someone who was never meant to die. I looked out the window. The lights of the evening city blurred beyond the glass. And inside a house where someone had just killed a man we'd already seen alive. I exhaled. "Now, Max, the real investigation begins." Chapter 13. There are two kinds of people in life. Those who fear the truth, and those who use it as a weapon. Today, I met a third kind, the one who knows how to forge the truth. The morning began with a smell of cigarettes that didn't belong to any of last night's guests. My blazer still reeked of yesterday's blackmail, and the coffee was as bitter as confessing love to the wrong woman. I returned to the crime scene, Edgar Smith's mansion. Not because I expected to find a new clue, but because killers are like cats. They sometimes return to the place where they once caught something. This time, I didn't need to dig through ashtrays or check for fingerprints. It was all in the air. The morning sun cut through the windows like an interrogation spotlight. And in that light, every guest from last night's party looked like an actor who'd forgotten their lines. I stepped into the lounge. It was empty. Or almost. In one of the armchairs sat his lawyer, Mr. Lambert. The same one who spoke in sentences that were too well rehearsed. A notebook rested on his knees. A glass in his hand. At 9 a.m., "You're early," I said. "And you're persistent," he replied, without looking up. "What are you looking for, Mr. Riley?" "Traces. Habits. The way people hold a glass when someone's murdered a billionaire nearby." He smiled, not with his mouth, with his eyes. "You think I know something?" "Number, I think you're hiding something." I sat across from him, set my coffee on the table. Lambert leaned back in the chair. You're not here for Edgar. You didn't even like him. Almost no one did. But his money, that's another story. Money, he repeated. It's always about money. You didn't flinch when he died. Didn't even go check the body. Remember? He said nothing. Took a sip. Who else knew he was planning to change the will, I asked. That's confidential. The dead don't care about confidentiality. He looked at me, and for the first time, without a mask. Only 3 people. Me, his daughter, and and one person you wouldn't recognize, but he was here. Yesterday, under a different name, a sting in my chest. Name? He sighed. Julian Barkley. I stood up. My head spun like a loaded revolver cylinder. Thank you. Lambert raised his glass. Take care of yourself, Mr. Riley. The truth is a dangerous thing, especially when it's already been sold. I walked out of the mansion thinking, this Barkley wasn't just a guest. He was a trigger, a spark, a man not on a single list, but whose presence could be felt in every look. There was only one thing left. Find out who brought him to the party. I don't like parties. Or rather, I don't like it when people pretend they're having fun, but inside, they're already corpses. Laughter on the outside, poison on the inside. And sometimes, that poison is literally in the champagne glass. The morning after Edgar Smith's murder, I sat in his office. The place from which he controlled billions, his lovers, and, as it turns out, his own death. The decor whispered wealthy, not flashy. The paintings real, the folders fake, all for show, all to misdirect. Max brought me coffee. Didn't ask if I wanted it. He already knew. That was progress. All guests have been questioned, he said, setting the mug down. The departure list matches the arrivals. And who's still here? I asked. Did you know your former home became the scene of a murder? I knew a dead man lived in it. No one had gotten around to turning off his lights yet. Smith? She nodded. He bought my house, stole my husband's business, seduced my daughter, ruined my lawyer, and she exhaled. Do you know how long a person can keep quiet? I stayed silent. Did you kill him? She laughed. No, Mr. Riley. I just came to see who would do it instead of me. Max found me 10 minutes later, in his hand a document. His will. Dated yesterday. I glanced at it. Who's the main beneficiary? No relatives. Just a foundation. Scientific research in the field of artificial intelligence. Who founded it? Max slowly read the name. Victor Dane. His personal advisor, his personal programmer, and the man who vanished right after dinner. I added, you think it's him? I think money doesn't lie. But signatures sometimes do. By evening, I knew everything I needed to. Smith had planned to shut the project down. Artificial intelligence. Millions invested. And only one result. We need to stop. Dane didn't want to lose everything. Convinced Smith to transfer the foundation to him. Papers signed 1 hour before death. But here's the catch. The signature on the will wasn't real. A copy. Drawn. Forged. We picked up Dane at a private terminal. He didn't resist. He just said, I simply continued the work. What he was too afraid to finish. But now without him, I'm free. And her? I asked. He froze. Who? Charlotte. Is she free too? He looked down. I owed her. A lot. I promised her the house would be hers again. When it was all over, I sat in the empty hall, the same one where yesterday wine was poured and a billionaire died. Max was silent. I poured myself some bourbon. "You think it's over?" he asked. "No," I replied. "It's just another act. The play's not finished, Max. And in this play, no one leaves before the curtain call. I always said people lie when they're silent. And worst of all, when they're politely silent. The party at Edgar Smith's mansion was like an antique powder box, shiny on the outside, sticky filth inside, smiles, champagne, gold-plated forks. And then the lord of the ball, a hypocrite with a fortune built on other people's failures, found dead in his study, throat slit, clean, fast, no panic, as if death was the new form of etiquette. He didn't even groan, I said, looking at the body neatly folded beside the bookshelf. Whoever did this had experience, or deep disgust. Next to me stood Max, young cop, eyes like a hunting dog. Still believed in procedures. I didn't anymore. Cameras disabled, staff in shock, guests acting like they saw nothing. Max looked like he was trying to solve a Rubik's Cube made of smoke. "Then it's classic," I said. "A murder in a room where everyone saw everyone except the killer." I walked around the room. The study was spotless. No struggle, no mess. Just an open bottle of brandy and a half-full glass. On the armrest of the chair, a handprint, feminine and expensive, with a ring worth more than a few of my cases. I pulled out a notebook, not to write, just to let the room know the game had begun. "His wife?" Max asked. "Elizabeth Smith? Elegant, cold, and too quick with an alibi." "No, Max, not her." "Then who?" I looked up. "Everyone." And he froze, because I wasn't joking. A pause before the gunshot. The room was getting loud, but not from voices, from the kind of silence people try to talk over. The music had stopped. The orchestra had stepped down, as if on cue. All that was left were footsteps, clinking glasses, the occasional cough, and the rustle of gowns. That's what panic sounds like among the wealthy. Wordless, tasteful, and perfectly civil. And I stood at the center, next to the body of Edgar Smith, a man who just yesterday could have bought an island and today couldn't even open his eyes. There was a faint smile frozen on his face. Or maybe it was a spasm. Either way, his final line had been delivered. Max approached from the side. Not loudly, but without the polite tone he'd used earlier with the waitress. I checked the entry camera. Everyone who came into the hall left, except one, who, Barbara Rose, Smith's wife. She stayed at the table the entire time. Didn't move. Even when it happened, she just sat there, like she already knew how it would end. Fear, number habit. She's lost people before. I looked over at her. Barbara, the kind of woman untouched by words, not by accusation, not by comfort. Her face like a mask, ironic, slightly bored, but her eyes cat-like, straight into your soul. And straight past it, I walked toward her. She didn't rise, just sat there, calm, as if this whole scene was just a delayed performance. "Mrs. Smith, may I have a word?" "Only if it's not about grief, detective. Only if it's not about lies." She raised an eyebrow, just slightly. "Very well, ask." "You didn't go to your husband when he collapsed. Why?" "Because I knew he was dead." "You a medic?" Number, I just knew Edgar. He didn't collapse. He was dying, and he did it with style. I sat down beside her. You were married to him for 3 years. Why? Because he paid, and I stayed quiet. That kind of love worked for both of us. Max stood at a distance. I gave him a signal, don't interfere. You knew he was planning to change the will? Of course, he threatened it every other week, but he never actually did it because he was afraid I'd say what I know. And what is it, Barbara looked at me like a teacher tired of dumb students. Detective, if you really knew what a billionaire's wife knows, you wouldn't be asking questions. You'd be calling for security. I stayed quiet, but I didn't say anything. So that means I'm not guilty, right? Depends what you didn't say. She smiled just enough. Enough for me to know. She didn't kill him, but she knew who did. Max stepped closer, holding a thin sheet of paper. It's a scan of the last guest pass. Each had a unique code. Only one person had a duplicate his daughter. She entered using his QR code, which means someone gave her access. Or she took it herself, I added. Barbara turned toward us. His daughter? You mean Clara? Yes. Then you understand nothing. Edgar hadn't seen Clara in 5 years. She was exiled, and she knew why. I stood up, and I saw her today. By the coat check. But I said nothing. Like always, because her story isn't mine. Max lifted his head. So she was at the party? Yes, Barbara said. But she left. Early. Before it all started, I turned to Max. We need the coat check footage. Fast. He was already pulling out his tablet, and I could feel it. The pause was over. Soon there'd be a confession. Or a gunshot. Maybe both. Chapter 17. You know what the thing is? If a murder looks like a scene from a cheap thriller with blood, screaming, and drama, it's the work of an amateur. A real murder is quiet. It's like a well-directed play where the audience applauds without knowing the actor is already dead. That was exactly how it felt. When I stepped into Edgar Smith's library, on the table, an empty glass. On the floor, not a crumb. In the air, absolute silence. If it weren't for the slightly crooked portrait above the fireplace, everything would have felt too perfect. Max followed behind me, wearing the face of a gambler who just realized the stakes were too high for bluffing. You sure he's here? He whispered. I'm sure that whoever should be here isn't. There was an impression on the carpet, a dent from a heavy boot, just one. The second print, gone, or never made at all. And that Max is a polite invitation to a lie. I sat in the chair by the window, the same one Smith had sat in yesterday, laughing at something that wasn't funny. His style always in control, even in laughter. He invited everyone who might know something, I said, and then he disappeared. Max said nothing. I pulled out a cigarette, didn't light it, just rolled it between my fingers. Now think about it. The victim, a billionaire. People come to him with expectations. Some want money. Some want truth. And some come to settle a score. I leaned closer to the desk. There, on its surface, a faint mark. Like someone had rested their palm there too long, fingers clenched tight. Someone was nervous, Max. And it wasn't Edgar. You think he's still alive? I smirked. I think he was alive longer than we were led to believe. and dead before anyone said a word. Max sat across from me. Wait, are you saying the body on the stairs wasn't him? I'm saying we've been watching the play this whole time and didn't even notice when they made us applaud. That's when the butler entered. The quiet one, face like a funeral engraving. Sir, someone would like to speak with you. A woman, Mrs. Lockhart. Max flinched. I didn't let her wait. Actually, no, let her in. She came in like a storm, held behind the door for too long, dressed in black, eyes full of things left unsaid. Did you find him? She asked. No greetings, no small talk. We did, just not where you expected. She sat down, took out a pack of cigarettes, snapped a lighter. I knew he wouldn't last. He knew too much, did too much. You mean him or yourself? She exhaled. The smoke hung in the air like a frozen thought. You know he was blackmailing people? I know you gave him a reason to... Silence. Sharp shadows on her face. I came to tell the truth. Why now? Because if you don't hear it from me, you'll hear it from someone who'll make it worse. I nodded. Then talk. Just remember, every word from now on isn't just sound. It's a bullet, and you choose who it hits. The night was damp, like the alibi of a drunk lord technically there, but useless. I stood under the yellow glow of a street lamp, leaning against the car, watching the last drops of rain slide down the windshield. Behind me, the mansion. Luxurious. The corpse inside also not cheap. But money doesn't save you when the one hunting you has more than a body on their conscience. They've got a whole story. I knew the killer was close. Already knew everything. Already saw everything. Just stalling, like a poker player holding aces, waiting for his opponent to make the first mistake. The door opened. Max stepped out first. Rumpled jacket, the face of a man who just counted lies instead of sheep. Behind him, 3 others. Lady Smith, the widow, Felix Harper, the lawyer, and Julian, the billionaire's personal secretary, all silent, like after a funeral, and all knew the show wasn't over. This was just the final scene. I walked forward, spoke, cold, calm, precise. So, who killed Edgar Smith? Silence. Of course, no one confesses until they realize there's no way out. Let's start with the simple part. Motive. Edgar was planning to rewrite the will. We know that. Who stood to lose millions from that? I nodded toward Lady Smith. You. Still his wife, but barely. Those millions were slipping away. That's speculation, she whispered. Maybe, but evidence isn't speculation. A glove with your perfume in the fireplace? That's evidence. A witness who saw you leaving his study 15 minutes before he died? Evidence. But you didn't kill him. She looked up. I didn't kill him. I know, I nodded. Because it's all too obvious. Max stepped forward. Julian? I turned to him. The personal secretary, the only one who knew Edgar was planning a dramatic confession for the crowd. But someone decided the ending would be real. No curtain, no retakes. You're insane, Julian hissed. I had no motive. Yes, you did, I said. You're his son. The silence hit the room like a glass dropped in a marble bathtub. Only the soft gasp of Lady Smith broke it. He paid your mother to keep quiet. All her life. Then he decided to stop. And that's when you showed up. Pretending to be someone else. A secretary. A servant, a shadow. Julian didn't move, his stare ice cold. It's not a crime to want justice, he said. But murder is, even if you've waited 28 years for it. He looked at me, and I knew. He understood. Didn't regret it, but understood. Max cuffed him. I stepped away. The rain started again. Behind me, the door slammed shut. It was just me now. And the wet pavement. You know the irony? Edgar Smith staged his final performance. He just didn't know someone else would write the ending. I lit a cigarette. First one in the whole damn case. And said out loud, "That's the end.